everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am so glad on this episode to be talking with a person who is just cool. I enjoy this person's work, and this is our second time talking on the podcast, and that is author, artist, professor Laura Gao. Laura, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
It's a pleasure. It is absolutely a pleasure. We're here to talk about a book that hits newsstands, is what I want to say, but we don't really have those anymore. Bookstores, online, and brick and mortar, and all the places. And that's Kirby's Lessons for Falling in Love, which is the follow-up to Messy Roots. Not a
It
sequel,
is.
but another book in the oeuvre that you're building.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to use the word oeuvre more often on the show. This
I
is
know,
the
I'm
second.
impressed.
Well,
Like an
thanks,
SAT
thanks.
word right there. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to do all that. I was also going to say that you have a lot of panache in the things that you create. So that might be a
Ooh,
first on the
that is.
podcast.
That is.
And your
First in my
style is
world
very.
too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But you definitely have a distinctive style, and Messy Roots is one of the books. If I were going to create a short list, if I was teaching a class in graphic novel memoir, for example, that would be one of the top choices, one of the premier places to look and best examples of that. So wonderful work. And as I mentioned, this follow-up is more of a fictional take, Kirby's Lessons. So
Mhm.
curious about what this new direction allowed you to explore.
Yeah. So Messy Roots was my first graphic memoir. It was about my life growing up, first in China and then in Texas and then later on in San Francisco. And that was all completely based in reality. Like all the memories, everything were all from my family, from myself, just like collecting it throughout my life. For when I finished that and I was thinking about what else I wanted to talk about, initially my publisher had asked for if I was interested in publishing another graphic memoir. And a lot of my readers had asked that too. I got fan mail about that, like, oh, like when's the next thing about your life? But it was funny because Messy Roots, I had originally hadn't attended to make it as big of a scope as it did. And so it covered actually a lot of my life. And it just felt weird to be like, here's a memoir about my life. And then, I only live like a few months after that. And then I'm like, oh, here's another memoir, right? Like it just seemed like I hadn't lived enough to write something else. But one thing that I consistently did get as a request from a lot of my readers were, especially readers who were figuring out their own queerness, and like going through their own journey around identity, was like, how do you juggle that with a lot of the more traditional aspects from many immigrant cultures, immigrant families? And on
Mhm.
top of that, there's this extra layer of like, I grew up in a very religious family. My family became Southern Baptist when they moved to Texas. I was raised up as a Southern Baptist, went to church, and a lot of kids I talked to had the same background. And they didn't really know how there's like this trifecta, right, of like their culture and family, their church, and then themselves, that they really had no idea how to piece together. And I had no idea like how to answer that on these like, school visits and like this book tour. Like, how do you tell a kid what to do when like their whole
Mhm.
life doesn't mesh together, right? And that's when I was like, wait, maybe there's something from my life I can tell. But because I was still really figuring out that journey for myself, that like, how does my identity overlap with my religion? And also I wanted this book to feature like a queer um romance that happened in high school. I knew it couldn't just be from my own life because I didn't come out actually until college, as you saw in Messy Roots. So I was like, okay, this won't be about me, but a lot of the topics will be rooted in what I'm currently exploring myself. So that's when I decided, let's make this fictional about this girl who like is similar to me in many aspects, but also is not similar to me in many aspects. She's really good at climbing. She's like has like a single mother and like this like ailing grandfather that they're both trying to take care of together. And like all these, she's like, you know, already semi out in high school and like really trying to figure out her life. But the similarities are that she also knows that because her father died at a very young age, which is not a spoiler because it does happen in like page 2 of the book.
Mhm.
Um, she knows that the only community that her family really has in Texas after they immigrated is their Chinese church community. So, like, that is something that was very core to my family in our immigrant journey. All of my family's closest friends are from the church. And so when I came out myself to my parents, I we really had to like figure out what does this mean for our community here in Texas. So that's kind of where Kirby's Lessons for Falling in Love came out of.
I appreciate so much of what you said there. And I also grew up Southern Baptist or some form of Baptist. There was some of that background happening. And as you get older and you start to experience life and explore complexity, there's always that time that's sort of like, okay, I had this idea of the world. I've been surrounded by this idea. And how does that link? How does that connect? What changes? What stays the same? And then I also love what you're saying about exploring your life through the lens of fiction, because that gives you some creative freedom. And it also gives
Mm-hmm.
you the chance to speak into other people's lives in a less like, here it is, here's what you do, just add water sort of way to say, life is complex, but here's one story of what it might look like.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was going for Kirby is that, the ending isn't picture perfect. It's not like tied up with a bow. There are good things and bad things that happen, but ultimately, like I wanted the overall theme to be something that all these kids who are wondering about how do I fit these puzzle pieces in my life can take into their lives.
Yeah. You've now stepped into sort of a teaching role. You have the ability to mentor others. And I am curious, it kind of leads from that talk about growing and changing and becoming an adult. What would you go back and tell a younger you about writing, arts, creating any part of that journey that you've been on?
Hmm, it's a great question. I've always been such a stubborn kid that I feel like if any like older counterpart came and was like, you should do this, I feel like me as a kid would just do the complete opposite.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. But I would say like I feel like as a kid, really struggling with my identity and also with being just stuck in the closet in this very religious and conservative town in Texas. I think like I probably one would probably tell younger me to get on the internet and go to Tumblr earlier
Mhm,
so that I
mhm.
could find that community because I was not really online until probably like late high school. Um, and there was not a single other queer person that was out in my entire high school of like 1,500 people. Like, actually, no, it was more. We were like 3,000 people, and like I did not know a single other queer person that was out. So I would have told them, Tumblr is where it's at if you need to find that crowd, and that it's okay to want to like leave and find that crowd elsewhere. The world is not as small as this like tiny little 10,000 person town. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm just thinking about what that would have been when I was in high school, and I grew up in a very rural, very religious community, so that would have been difficult for someone to take those steps and take that journey. So I don't remember anyone voicing that, voicing a coming out experience, which gives me a lot of hope because I see more in that direction now among students that I work with and among different
Mhm.
places that I've been. So hopefully some change in a positive direction in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, like my brother, he is 5 years younger, and I think when he went through the same high school system, like he actually had come to me with like a couple of friends who were questioning and like just needed someone else to talk to. And I was out to my brother early on, so I was glad that he came to me for that. And especially when Messy Roots was published too, I feel like I got a lot of folks from Capel, like from my town, reaching out and like opening up about it. So I think that gave me a lot of hope to be like, oh, I'm glad this younger generation is a lot more brave than we were back then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and brave storytelling on your part as well, and the willingness to share of yourself through a graphic novel memoir that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Going back to the fictional self, thinking about Kirby, what was it like creating this character?
It was a huge journey. I had originally been like, oh man, like fiction's going to be so fun and so much easier because I don't have to like, dig through my own wounds, my own traumas. I can just make everything up and make everything as fun as I want it to be. And then I realized that the double-edged sword of being able to control everything is that then you are basically on the hook for every small thing you decide to do.
Hmm.
And that because there's a million different ways you can take the story, you start to really doubt yourself, at least with a memoir, you're like, well, that's my memory, so that's what I'm gonna go with, right?
Right,
But
right.
with the fictional book, like you truly like as someone especially who didn't get an MFA and didn't really have any like real quote unquote like standardized training in writing and storytelling, I felt like I almost had like a MFA on steroids, just trying to relearn like what it was like to create a story, create a structure, create the story beats. And while I did do that with Messy Roots, because I had the structure of just like my life story already there, it's a little easier.
Mhm.
With Kirby, I actually had gone through like three completely written stories that are all very different from each other, all feature different characters that I had written full scripts for that I turned into my editor and agent, and they all were just like, nope, not there yet. I like scrapped all three before I finally got to Kirby. And I was like very happy when they're like, all right, I think you got it with this one.
Yeah, yeah. Without any spoilers, I'm going to tuck this question here, and you're welcome to ignore it if it doesn't fit what you want to say. Um, but the book is called Lessons for Falling in Love. So what is a great lesson for falling in love, do you think?
Ooh.
That was not on the list, so I'm glad to edit this out if
Oh,
you
I
don't want.
love this. No, no, I love this question. I love this because like I mean, I wrote Kirby during a time in which I was very much exploring my own love lives.
Mhm.
Um, and actually when I first posted about Kirby, I posted how like a lot of the inspiration came from every single partner I dated during this like 3, 4 year period of time that I was working on Kirby. And like every single relationship really fed into that, both good and bad parts. So yeah, so I think like one lesson that I really took from life and like kind of put into Kirby is um I think many times after a really bad relationship, we can be so scared of
Yeah.
trying again. Um, but I think when you meet that person that you are scared of not trying again, then that's when you kind of know that that's the person. And that's actually how I feel like I found my current partner of 3 years now, and we're planning on getting engaged soon. And like just 3 years ago, like I was in a spot where I was almost like just done with dating.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm very happy with myself. And sometimes like people just kind of like fall into your life. And this like now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably like actually where Kirby was almost like first inspired too, because my partner, I met her at the climbing gym
Mm.
and we were belay partners in top roping. And so like we literally were like falling in front of each other in a way.
Hmm.
Um, and that is not a graceful thing. Let me tell you, like, probably do not go to a climbing gym as your first date, especially if you've never climbed before, because the least sexy thing possible is like falling on your face or your butt in front of this like beautiful girl, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, and like just bumping everywhere against the wall. and I remember like just like so many mortifying things, but because of like the connection, the spark we felt, none of that really mattered. And I think
Yeah,
that's when I realized, wow, like this is actually what like a healthy, like a good relationship is supposed to feel like.
that's
So
cool.
I think that's what I kind of wrote taking like going into Kirby, is like Kirby is someone who does suffer a fall physically from climbing, and suffers a lot of also emotional trauma from like her failures of like coming out in many ways throughout the book, but to take that fear and take that dare to continue despite of it, I think
Mhm.
that's really how love ends up triumphing in the end.
Very nicely said. Very nicely said. And congratulations on finding your partner and also finding a perfect metaphor for the story as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, what do you hope? And I know it's a big question because there are lots of things that are part of reading experiences, but what do you hope is one thing that your readers take from Kirby?
um Oh man. Oh, one, I really hope they love all the characters. I put
Mhm.
so much heart and soul into each character and like had rewritten so many characters early on that like now they just really embodied me, and I do really hope that the readers love them and like just care for them. I think the other thing is like going back to what I said earlier in the podcast about readers wondering like what do I do when like who I am doesn't comes into could completely blow up my family or like my family's community and like my church community. And I do hope the ending of Kirby is something that gets them thinking about that. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be perfect, but from what at least I've learned in life is that a lot of times community, you'll be surprised by how much community expands beyond just like the beliefs that they hold true to.
And as kind of linking that with what you were saying about uh, climbing as a first date, like that idea of being vulnerable and being completely yourself and being okay with it. And it's very
Mm-hmm.
cool when people reciprocate that and they love you as you are.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think like part of that's also like being open to accepting that, in both ways, like being open to accepting that there will be people that you thought would love you unconditionally that may not after you come out, but also accepting that there will be people who you totally thought would turn away who absolutely embrace you. And I think that latter was actually what really surprised me, like when I first came out to my family, was that so actually part of the religious part that really inspired Kirby and why it made the like Chinese church such a big part of it is when I first came out to my parents, they had no one else to really turn to about this, because no one else in our community had ever experienced something like that. And
Mhm.
so the one and only person they opened up to and like dared to open to about this was our church pastor. And that family is a family that like I've grown up with ever since I was like a toddler that just came to Texas, right? And like
Mhm.
they took care of us growing up. Like when my parents were sick, they were the ones bringing us food. When like they were sick, we were the ones like going over and like taking care of them. Like it was just such a multi-family unit, that like small family church we grew up in. And I remember the next morning I had already flown back to San Francisco and I suddenly get a call from the pastor's wife. And I'm like my immediate reaction is like, ah, crap. Like she's totally going to like have a come to Jesus moment with me,
Right, right.
like my parents definitely told her what happened and she's going to be like, oh no, how could you do this to us? But I answered anyways because I was like, like she's still part of the family. Like I'm going to see what she has to say. And she completely surprised me because the first thing she said was like, you know, we're all old and we may not understand you. But at the end of the day, like who you are is only between you and God. And so none of us have any place to judge. And I don't think she knew at the time, but I had essentially like not been religious for a while at that point. Um, but I still very much like loved my church community because they are family to me. And to hear that from her, it was just like such a weight lifted off my shoulder. And it surprised me so much to where I was like, you know what, maybe if we really did give these people a chance, they could come around, you know, maybe
Mhm.
we in the same way they have biases against us, we also have biases against them. And so I think that really like became a turning point in like helping my own parents understand where I was coming from and for me to understand where my parents were coming from. Like they were kind of playing that like intermediate in a way. So I think that's like one really touching memory I had when I came out that I wanted to be like a huge inspiration for what happens in Kirby.
Yeah. Just pausing to give some appreciation to that before the final question. But this is cool. I think we're going to some places in our talk this time that we didn't go to in the first talk. So that's always an interesting thing. Um, I suppose the last question is what's currently in your creative focus? What currently has your attention? And then any place that people can go to learn more. I know that you have an Instagram where I see lots of delicious food from time to time. I know that you have a website, but any physical or online spaces where people can connect.
Yeah. So my current creative focus is teaching. So early on we talked about how I just started as a professor at the CCA here in San Francisco. They're a California College of the Arts. I'll be teaching advanced comics writing for them. And this is my first time teaching a comics level seminar. So I'm super stoked for all the students. Really stoked to just kind of like geek out about comics for 3 hours every week.
Yeah,
And that's gonna be my focus this upcoming year. I think I'm gonna take a little break from writing and just really rejuvenate my own creative energy. And just like kind of put that out into the community instead. And then for where to find me, so anywhere on social media, you can find me at Hey Laura Gao. And then you can find me also on my website, which is just lauragao.com. I accept any and all fan mail, so feel free to send whatever you like.
sounds great. Sounds great. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure to include about the book or anything else that is on your mind before we close out?
I don't think so. I just hope, I hope folks pre-order it. And then if you do pre-order, just like shoot me a fan mail, and then I have some actually special Kirby prints I can send you. So they will be selling hot for Valentine's Day soon. So make sure you get on top of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll make sure that this gets out in time for Valentine's Day as well.
Awesome.
All right. Well, many thanks, Laura. I'm glad to have you back anytime to talk about arts, teaching, comics, projects, all of the above, or anything else.
Same here, Jason. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.